Former House Speaker and GOP presidential candidate Newt Gingrich, thanks so much for being with us here on Newsmax TV today.
I'm glad to talk with you.
Well, the Obama administration announced today that it'll stop deporting and now grant immunity to illegal immigrants who came to the U.S. as children. How do you view this policy?
I think it's very strange. If the president has the power to do that, why didn't he do it 3 years ago? And if he can do it for people under 16, can he do it for everybody? I don't understand the legal basis of doing it. And it makes you wonder, is he just doing this as an election year gimmick? And if it's the right policy, why did he fail to do it for 3.5 years?
In his economic speech yesterday, the president said the election will determine the fate of the economy and again made his case for government action to lift the middle class. He's attempting to portray himself as a man of the people while perpetuating the idea or myth that Republicans want to enrich the wealthy at the expense of the middle class. Do you think that the American electorate is going to buy this?
Well, I think that Obama has a huge problem because of performance. This is the worst economy since the Great Depression. Gasoline prices are the highest on average for the last year in history. The deficits are enormous. So he's got to make a case somehow that you're better off under Obama. And I think it's almost impossible to make. If you just ask people, can you afford 4 more years of this? I think that the answer overwhelmingly is no.
Now, David Axelrod said this week that if President Obama were to win re-election, that the administration will attempt to change the First Amendment protections that protect political speech. Why do you think the Obama administration is so concerned about silencing its detractors?
I think people who like big government have a permanent need to protect it from the citizens. It's the exact opposite of the American Revolution. It's the opposite of why we created the Constitution. It's the opposite of why Jefferson insisted on a Declaration of Independence, or rather why he insisted on a Bill of Rights. But I think if you look at machine politicians like Axelrod, who come out of a Chicago background, having government control to them, it makes them very comfortable.
Now, Mitt Romney is on a 6-state tour aimed at winning over independents. He continues to do better in the polls. What is your advice to Mitt Romney in terms of how he should be carrying this momentum forward?
Well, first of all, I think he's doing a pretty good job. I mean, we've had 3 weeks now of Obama on defense and Romney on offense, so I think that's pretty good. I think there are 2 simple phrases. One is, can you really afford 4 more years of Obama? And the other is, we can do better. And I think if Romney can convince people that with Romney we can do better than we are doing under Obama, and if he gets them to decide that they can't afford 4 more years of Obama, then I think this election will be over.
Now, there's a lot of talk and speculation about who Mitt Romney will choose as his running mate. Who do you think that he should have on the ticket?
Well, he has a lot of good choices. Senator Rob Portman would be one. Senator Kelly Ayotte of New Hampshire would be one. Certainly Senator Marco Rubio. Governor Susana Martinez of New Mexico. Maybe somebody like Governor Bobby Jindal or somebody like Governor Mitch Daniel. I mean, or frankly, although I think he may not want to take it, but Governor Scott Walker has now become a national figure and a national leader in reform. So I think that Governor Romney is going to have a lot of really good choices to think about in July in trying to decide who to pick.
How do you think Scott Walker would benefit the Romney campaign?
Well, you have a courageous person who has reformed state government, who took on the unions and won decisively, who's very pro-job creation, who was the head of the largest local government in Wisconsin, the Milwaukee County government, did a great job there, cut taxes, created jobs, streamlined the bureaucracy. So he's got a great story to tell, and of course he just became, for conservatives, kind of a national hero in the fight over his survival.
The Supreme Court is expected to release its ruling on Obamacare any day now. Assuming all or parts of it are struck down as unconstitutional, what do you think should be the GOP's next move?
I think that we should repeal it immediately. I think it becomes totally unworkable. First of all, the court could decide to repeal the whole thing because there was no what's technically called severability clause written in. Normally when big bills are written, they have a clause that says if any part of this bill is found unconstitutional, it is severed from the rest of the bill. In the absence of that, technically you could argue that if any of the bills are unconstitutional, the whole bill is unconstitutional. They failed to write that clause in. It was a mistake on their part. I think the Republicans' first reaction should be to move in the House to repeal all of it and to really have a straight up or down fight, because if they repeal the individual mandate, they knock out the central pillar of the whole bill. And I think at that point it becomes very hard to see how it's going to work.
How big of an issue do you see this being in the 2012 election?
Oh, Obamacare is an enormous issue. I mean, every small business is afraid to hire somebody because they don't know what the health care costs are going to be. Every hospital is afraid. Every insurance company is afraid. There are a lot of people who realize that Obamacare is both unworkable, very expensive, and an enormous increase in the size of government.
Senate Republicans are calling for a special prosecutor to investigate national security leaks believed to be coming from the White House, presumably for political gain. President Obama said that he finds the allegations offensive, and the White House says no special prosecutor is needed. Do you believe that a special prosecutor should be named, and is there any evidence of criminal wrongdoing here?
I think the president has a very simple defense, which is for him to personally say that he declassified them. The President of the United States can always declassify things. But if they were leaked without his having declassified them, then they clearly are a serious offense. Remember, Dick Cheney's chief of staff went to jail in an investigation that was much smaller about whether or not one CIA agent who was sitting in Langley, Virginia, and was in no danger at all, whether or not that person had been inappropriately named. That was considered by the left to be a huge, big issue. Now, all of a sudden, when it's Obama's team that may have been leaking, and remember, these leaks are almost all designed to reelect Obama. So you have to assume they're politically inspired. Now, if the president wants to take responsibility for the leaks, all he's got to say is, I authorized them, I am the president, I can declassify things. And then he's got to defend whether that was the right thing to do.
Now, as part of these leaks, it was revealed that President Obama has a secret kill list. In your view, should a president have a kill list and make extrajudicial decisions about targeted killings?
Yes.
How come?
The President of the United States is the commander-in-chief. We live in an era when we have terrorists who are plotting to kill Americans, defining who is on that list, as long as they're not American citizens. Or, if, as in the case of the sheikh, the American sheikh who was in Yemen, they're American citizens who are at war with the United States, in which case they give up all of their civil liberties. Somebody has to make a decision. The president can delegate it to some extent, but in the end, it's the president's responsibility. Mm-hmm. Is he going to authorize that we use some method to kill a particular person? And I think that in this kind of setting, because you're not talking about a battlefield, you're not talking about a big fight, you're talking about a deliberate decision to go after a particular human being. I think that probably does in the end up on the president's desk.
Okay, Attorney General Eric Holder yesterday said that he'll make an extraordinary accommodation and release some fast and furious documents to avoid contempt charges. He wants to meet with Darrell Issa to reach a deal. What is your take on this?
He's terrified because if they vote contempt, he's going to have to resign. And Darrell Issa should agree to meet with him and should say, terrific, release everything we want or we're going to vote contempt.
You think he'll end up resigning?
I think he'll end up releasing everything they want. I think he literally, if the House votes contempt, it becomes impossible politically. I mean, how does the president run for re-election with an attorney general under contempt for refusing to provide information to the Congress?
Quick question for you on foreign affairs. A day before its presidential election, there are reports that Egypt's parliament is dissolving. Are you concerned Egypt won't be able to transition to democracy, and what are the consequences?
I think Egypt is in a delicate balance of power, just as Turkey is, between the military, which is the most modernizing force in the country, and civilian elements, many of which, frankly, represent a very radical Islamist view. I'm not so sure that we as a country wouldn't be better off to have a more cautious, more stable system rather than to rush to embrace people like the Muslim Brotherhood, who I think are ultimately committed to our defeat.
Last question for you, Mr. Speaker. Do you believe that the European debt crisis will infect the U.S.?
Oh, sure, to some extent. Because I think Greece is going to collapse. I think Spain and Italy may collapse. I think the euro may be in chaos, and I think that affects our banking system. It affects exports. I mean, if the European economy keeps slowing down, that's going to affect everybody in the world. And ironically, The price of oil is falling right now in part because the economy is getting so bad that people aren't buying gasoline. Mm-hmm. The amount of gasoline bought in Italy has dropped 25% this year.
Mm-hmm. When do you see this happening? When will Americans feel the worst of it? And is this country prepared for it?
We're not prepared for it. The government, I think, has been following a policy of inflation and trying to prop things up. You can't tell. I mean, I would have thought last September that we were on the edge of a crisis, and they've managed to kind of stumble along week after week. But what's happening is it's gradually getting worse. I mean, Greece was the starting point. Now Spain is in real trouble. Italy's beginning to be in real trouble. I think they get to a point where the Germans can't afford to keep bailing everyone out.
Could this push the U.S. into depression?
No, I think that it is one of the things that is weighing down the recovery, and I think it makes it harder for us to recover. And frankly, you have to ask the question, if you've got 19% of the country is either unemployed, underemployed, or dropped out of work, I'm not sure for those folks of how they would notice the difference. I mean, we have very serious economic problems.
Mr. Speaker, thanks so much for joining us on Newsmax TV. It's always a pleasure having you on.
It's always good to be on Newsmax.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.